We're talking about how to master any scale across the fretboard the fastest way possible. And this is the third video in the series, so if you haven't watched the others, go back and do that first. Because we're going to talk about something that we talked about in the previous video, how we are going to go from the level of remembering scale shapes and being able to see them on the fretboard and move through them to the point where it's totally effortless. And what do I usually call that level? Where everything is effortless, you don't even think about it. It's like talking, it just happens right now with no pre-thinking, right? What do I call that direct level where there's no obstacle to expressing yourself? It's called mastery, right? And so how do we reach mastery when it comes to these scale shapes? And I have one piece of advice for you that is super important. Most people underestimate the value of it, but you shouldn't. And before I give it to you, please click the link below, go visit our website, check out the program Fretboard Freedom, which is all about how to learn scales the fastest way possible, and it contains a shortcut that is amazing. Okay, so we discussed the fact that we load stuff into our short-term memory, then we hurry up and forget it again so we can relearn it, and we scramble that memory of the scale shape we just learned really rapidly by learning other scale shapes or loading them into our short-term memory. When we do that enough, instead of practicing the same two scale shapes for a day, we practice, a lot of scale shapes, but we keep revisiting one with focus in order to forget and learn it. Or go back and watch the video. But, and then eventually it gets saved on our hard drive, our long-term memory, so we never forget that shape. But from there to absolute effortless playing, where it's not even a remembering, it's a pattern more, right? Like you drive a stick shift car, if you ever tried to, and you get really used to it, and at some point, or ride a bike. That's also a pretty complex thing. At least you feel that in the beginning, right? But driving a stick shift car, there's so many things, the clutch, the accelerator, whatever you call it, the brake, the stick shift, and watching the road and talking to your family as you drive. There's so many things going on, and the only way to learn that for the brain and be able to do it effortlessly is to make it into one thing. It groups all these little processes into one pattern, you could say. Right, that's one example. Another example is, how do you learn to synchronize the left and right hand that's another area completely. But the only way to learn to play really fast, and then as you play really fast, you combine different sequences or you've combined different patterns in order for you to do that. There's no way you can play single notes or process that many notes individually. So what you basically do is you practice sequences, and then you put sequences. Sequences is just a little pattern, like, stuff like that. And you practice those, and then you practice putting them together. And that is what the brain can do. It can recognize a pattern and push a button and fire off that pattern. It's automation, right? That's the last level of fretboard freedom. And in order to get to that point where you can just push a button and then your brain just plays that scale, it's not a visual thing anymore. You just play, right? You just, okay, we're in the key of C minor. That's a pattern. It's a pattern in my brain. I'm not remembering anything. It's like pushing a button, or I am, but it's not stored as information anymore. It's stored as a pattern. Let me see if I can give you another example, because it's everywhere. It's in talk, you learn to talk, speak. Gradually you build a vocabulary of simple words, then you add words, and suddenly they just take on a power of their own, where you can just put them together like this and just speak, right? With no preparation, without thinking, because you can't think because you don't have the words yet, right? But it just happens. It's a pattern, and language is a very complex set of little patterns. What is each pattern? Well, first of all, letters in a word put together is a pattern. You don't read the individual letters anymore, do you? When you look at a billboard at a train station, you don't go, A, B says eb, E says abe. You don't do that anymore. You don't read the letters. You just look at a word and bam, that it becomes one thing, right? When you look at it, that's a really good example. It becomes one thing. So if you look at a word like complicated, you don't recomplicate. You just look at the letters in combination, and your brain immediately, with no hesitation, if you can read, that is, well, then your brain immediately just goes complicated, complicated. You can't look at it even without your brain saying complicated. That's why the billboards has so much power, because you can't look at it and not read it. It speaks to you. It pushes, the billboard pushes a button in your brain, right? That makes you say the word. That's how powerful these patterns are. And the same thing goes for when you're learning scale shapes. So how do you go from, okay, now I know all the scale shapes. I can actually remember them, and I'm not hesitant anymore, but I'm not immediate, because that's mastery. It's picking up your guitar, you got smoke in your eyes, the light is weird, and you're still playing the scale shapes perfectly. That's mastery. How do we get to that level of effortlessness? Well, what you do is the simplest thing in the world that people seem to overlook, and that is use your scale shapes to play music. Put on a jam track. We got hundreds of jam tracks on guitarmastery.net. All you do is create a user profile, click the link jam tracks once you've created the profile, and you can browse between all kinds of styles. But the thing is, I've been using that, once I figured this out, I was just using jam tracks all the time, and I couldn't get enough of them. Then I bought a looper pedal so I can create my own in the moment. But jam tracks are really cool because it makes it extra fun to practice, and if it's fun, you want to do it more, and so you can become better, right? But go to our website and then start practicing using jam tracks every single day. And every time you feel that you're bored, just put on another jam track that inspires you to play something, that makes it easy to play something cool. Because once you do that, your brain goes to another experience. Suddenly, you have to use what you've learned. And that is what brings it from the conceptual, visual level over to the total automation level. But you need to do it every single day, and preferably multiple times a day. You should, once you get out of bed, put on a jam track, start playing using the scale shapes you learned yesterday, right? Then, at work, you just put on another jam track in the lunch break, and then we get home, and just before you go to bed, as many times during the day, as many times with spaces in between during the week and the month. That is the surefire way. That's what gets you there, because that's the last stage of practicing what you want to learn. That's the whole point of learning the scale shapes. Most people think that we can learn the tools of playing. Well, I learned the scales, I learned the rhythm skills, I learned the picking skills, the sweep picking, the alternate picking, the legato, whatever. Then I learned and the sequences and the licks, right? And then magically, the skill appears. But that doesn't happen. We got 5 different sub-skills to the skills of soloing, or the skill of soloing, and we learn all those, and then we wonder why we can't solo freely. But that's because we need to practice that as well. We need to integrate these. And the only way to integrate these is to practice it each day by playing up against a jam track. All right? And if you can't do that, just limit yourself. That's the key to being able to do it. Limit yourself to one note and some rhythm, and play a little bit of a solo with that. Then go for 2 notes. Go for half a scale shape, then an entire one. See if you can find one note that sounds good, or 2 notes that you can shift between that sounds good over the jam track. Then develop from there. Play over jam tracks and do it every day. And buy a looper pedal if you don't have one already, so you can really design your own tracks to play over. That is so important. Do it every day. And the reason why I'm a little bit adamant about it and a little bit focused and slightly, because if you look at the views that our jam track videos get on YouTube, it's not a lot. So get going. Practice what you want to learn. If you want to become great at playing solos, play solos every single day. It will integrate both your technique and your scale shapes and everything, and move from knowing them and being able to remember them on a long-term level to absolutely mastering them. That's how every single top player out there became that good at it. Every player who's fluent became that way by playing. So play every single day. And just because it's fun doesn't mean that it's not effective. Just because it doesn't hurt anywhere when you do it, because we have this idea that we should suffer, right, in order to get good. So I put in the effort. I use self-discipline, right? But nothing could be farther from the truth, because if you suffer, you won't really learn much. So Just because this is fun doesn't mean it isn't effective. So do it every day, do it multiple times a day, and do it over and over and over again. And never forget, it's the point of everything, right? So integrate everything, learn the scale shapes to the point of absolute mastery by really, and then focus once you play. And you use the scale shapes. Don't stay in the first position pentatonic shape, right? Use all the scale shapes that you've been practicing. Challenge yourself as you have the jam track in the background. And then gradually everything will be more and more fluent and automatic. And that's what we all want. So go check out the program. Click the link below here. And I'll see you pretty soon.